In the steel and glass canyons of Manhattan, Beverly had learned to make herself small, a trick of survival that contradicted everything about her 5'10" frame and the regal way she naturally held her shoulders. For 3 years, she'd been George Whitmore's driver, navigating his black Mercedes S-Class through rush-hour traffic while he barked orders from the back seat, often referring to her simply as driver, despite knowing her name perfectly well. Beverly was the kind of woman who could turn heads with a glance, though she'd trained herself to look straight ahead, to blend into the leather and chrome of the vehicle that had become her world. Behind her calm exterior and patient, "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," responses lived a woman who had once walked for Valentino, who had graced the cover of Vogue Paris, who knew what it felt like to own a room simply by entering it. The turning point arrives when George, flush with another billion-dollar deal and drunk on his own magnificence, decides his 50th birthday gala needs authentic entertainment. His friend Marcus suggests inviting Beverly to the black tie affair at the Metropolitan Club as a joke, a social experiment to watch someone from her station fumble with the wrong fork. George laughs and agrees, expecting comedy. What he doesn't know is that the invitation he's extending as mockery is actually opening a door he can never close. As Beverly reaches into the back of her closet past the sensible work clothes, her fingers find silk and memory. The dress she pulls out isn't just fabric, it's resurrection. And George's joke is about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. Beverly's alarm chimed at 5:30 every morning, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. By 6, she was behind the wheel of George's Mercedes, the leather still cold beneath her hands as she pulled out of the garage in Murray Hill. The city at dawn belonged to people like her, the invisible ones who made other people's lives run smoothly. "You're 2 minutes late," George said on Tuesday morning, sliding into the back seat without looking at her face. He never looked at her face. "My apologies, Mr. Whitmore. There was an accident on—" "I don't need excuses, driver. I need punctuality." Beverly's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles briefly visible before she relaxed her grip. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." She navigated toward Midtown, where George had a breakfast meeting with investors. Through the rearview mirror, she watched him scroll through his phone, his silver hair perfectly styled, his white suit jacket hanging on the hook beside him. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had never been told no, who had mistaken wealth for wisdom. "The charity gala tonight is at 7, he said without preamble. "Don't be late picking me up. And for God's sake, use the service entrance. Last time you pulled up front like you were dropping off someone important." "Of course, Mr. Whitmore." The words tasted like ash, but Beverly had learned to swallow them. She thought about Tuesday nights in Milan, about the way camera flashes used to feel like applause against her skin. She thought about a different version of herself who wouldn't have said, "of course," to a man like George Whitmore. That evening, she waited in the service alley behind the Plaza Hotel while George attended a cancer research benefit inside. Through the kitchen windows, she could see the warm glow of chandeliers, hear the faint strains of a string quartet. She'd worn heels to events like that once. She'd been photographed at events like that. "Ready," George announced, appearing at the car door at 11 sharp. He smelled like expensive whiskey and self-satisfaction. "God, these things are tedious, though I suppose they're tax-deductible, so there's that." Beverly said nothing, just merged back into traffic, carrying him home while he scrolled through emails, already forgetting the evening, the cause, the people who had smiled at him because of his checkbook. She wondered if he'd ever actually seen her, really seen her. Not likely, she thought, as she pulled up to his building and he exited without a word of thanks. Not likely at all. The dinner party at George's penthouse stretched past midnight,
fueled by a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost more than Beverly made in 2 months. She'd been dismissed hours ago, but called back to drive Marcus home, which meant waiting in the kitchen while the men's laughter echoed through the marble halls. 50 years old and still single? Marcus was saying, his words slightly slurred. Your birthday party needs something memorable, George, something people will actually talk about. My parties are always memorable, George replied, ice clinking in his glass. They're predictable, Trevor countered. Same people, same conversations, same charity auction nobody cares about. You need entertainment, real entertainment. Beverly kept her eyes on her phone, pretending not to hear, though George's kitchen was designed with acoustics that carried every word from the dining room. What did you have in mind? George asked. Invite someone completely out of place, Marcus said. Someone who'll be so uncomfortable they'll make the whole thing hilarious, like, I don't know, your driver. The silence that followed felt heavy with consideration. Beverly? George's voice carried amusement now, the way a child sounds when presented with a particularly clever prank. Exactly. Tell her it's a gesture of appreciation or some nonsense. Watch her show up in whatever department store dress she can afford, using the wrong fork, completely out of her depth. Your friends will love it. Trevor laughed, sharp and cruel. It's brilliant. Very democratic of you, George. Very man of the people. You're terrible, George said, but he was laughing too. Though I suppose it would be amusing. She'd probably decline anyway. People like that know their place. Only one way to find out, Marcus said. Beverly's jaw tightened. She'd heard enough conversations like this over 3 years to recognize the particular tone wealthy men used when discussing people they considered beneath them, part curiosity, part contempt, entirely detached from the reality that their entertainment had feelings. 20 minutes later, George appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie with one hand. Beverly, before you take Marcus home, a word. She stood, smoothing her black slacks, and met his gaze with practiced neutrality. My birthday gala is next Saturday at the Metropolitan Club, black tie naturally. I'd like to extend you an invitation as a gesture of appreciation for your service. The words hung between them like a test. Beverly could see the anticipation in his face, the barely suppressed smirk. He expected her to stammer, to decline, to prove that she knew her place. Instead, she let 3 seconds of silence stretch between them, long enough to see uncertainty flicker across his features, before responding, "Thank you, Mr. Whittemore. I accept." His smile faltered for just a moment before recovering. "Excellent. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." As he walked away, Beverly allowed herself the smallest of smiles. He had no idea what he'd just done. Beverly's apartment in Brooklyn was small, but carefully kept, the kind of space that revealed a person who hadn't given up entirely, just folded herself smaller to fit into a life she'd never imagined living. She stood in the doorway of her bedroom closet, staring at the back corner where the past lived in a garment bag and 3 cardboard boxes she hadn't opened in 2 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled down the first box. The magazine covers spilled across her bed like evidence of another woman's life. Vogue Paris, April 2015, her face in profile, lips painted crimson, eyes closed as if in prayer. Harper's Bazaar, her body draped in Chanel against the Monaco coastline. L, Marie Claire, W, a dozen versions of herself staring back, each one more confident than she'd felt in years. She traced her fingers across one cover, remembering the girl who'd believed the lights would never go out. That girl hadn't known her mother would get sick, hadn't known that cancer didn't care about runway schedules or contracts with IMG, hadn't known she'd liquidate everything, the Soho apartment, the savings, the carefully built life, to pay for experimental treatments that ultimately bought only 6 more months. The runway photos were harder to look at. There she was in Valentino, walking the Milan spring-summer show like she owned the very air. there in Paris, wearing Balmain like armor. She'd been 28 in these photos, at the peak of her career, fielding offers from brands that would have set her up for life. All of it gone now, or so she'd thought. The garment bag hung at the back of the closet like a secret. Beverly unzipped it slowly, and the sapphire silk seemed to shimmer even in the dim bedroom light. Elie Saab, custom-made for her final Paris Fashion Week show in 2016. She'd never worn it publicly. Her mother had been rushed to the hospital the morning of the show, and Beverly had chosen the ICU over the runway without hesitation. The dress still fit perfectly when she held it against her body. The deep V-neck, the way the silk draped to accentuate every line she'd spent years perfecting in Pilates and bar classes. This wasn't a dress that apologized for taking up space. This was a dress that demanded attention, that announced arrival rather than requesting permission. Beverly carried it to her bed and laid it beside the magazine covers, studying the contrast, the woman she'd been and the garment that could remind the world she'd existed. George's invitation had been meant as mockery, a setup designed to put her in her place. He wanted entertainment. He wanted to watch her squirm. Beverly picked up her phone and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 3 years. "Maria? It's Beverly. Beverly Chen. I need your help with something." She paused, looking at the dress again, feeling something unfurl in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. "I need you to help me remind some people who I am."
Maria's studio in the garment district hadn't changed. Still the same organized chaos of fabric swatches, mannequins, and the faint smell of coffee that never quite left the air. When Beverly walked in Friday afternoon, Maria looked up from her sewing machine and froze, her dark eyes widening with something between shock and joy. "Dios mío," Maria whispered, standing slowly. "Beverly Chen, in my studio, after 3 years of silence." "I know," Beverly said quietly. "I'm sorry. After everything with my mom, I just..." "Stop." Maria crossed the space between them and pulled Beverly into a fierce embrace. "You survived. That's what matters." She pulled back, hands on Beverly's shoulders, studying her face. "But you didn't come here for an apology. You came here for war." Beverly smiled despite herself. Maria had always been able to read her. Something like that. Over espresso, Beverly explained George, the invitation, the setup. Maria listened without interruption, her expression darkening. "He thinks you'll show up looking tragic," Maria said finally, "like someone playing dress-up." "Exactly. So we remind him and everyone else that you don't play dress-up. You are the dress." Maria stood, energy crackling around her like electricity. "The Elie Saab is perfect, but we need the right undergarments, the right shoes, and your hair. When's the last time you had it properly done?" "I've been doing it myself." "Of course you have." Maria was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling Antonio, and we need to talk about your walk, your posture. You've been making yourself small, haven't you? Shrinking from men like this George?" Beverly nodded, feeling something crack open in her chest. "Tomorrow, you walk into that room like you're in Paris again. No, better than Paris. You walk in like you're coming home." Across Manhattan, George stood in his penthouse reviewing the seating chart for his gala with his event planner, Simone. He'd strategically placed Beverly's name card at a table near the back, next to his accountant's wife, who had a tendency to talk about her cats extensively. "Marcus thinks I should introduce her during the toast, really lean into the whole magnanimous employer thing before she inevitably does something awkward." Simone made a notation on her tablet. "Should we prepare the staff in case she needs help with protocol?" "God, yes. She'll probably try to tip the servers or something." George laughed, already imagining the stories he'd tell for months. "This is going to be perfect."
His phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. "Can't wait for tomorrow night. You're terrible and I love it." George texted back, "Entertainment guaranteed." In Brooklyn, Beverly stood in front of her mirror wearing the sapphire gown while Maria circled her like a sculptor examining her work. "There," Maria said softly, "there she is, the woman who stopped traffic in Milan." Beverly met her own eyes in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back, not because she looked different, but because she'd forgotten what it felt like to look like herself. "Let's go show them."
The town car Beverly hired pulled up to the Metropolitan Club at 7:15, fashionably late, as Maria had insisted. Through the tinted windows, Beverly could see the red carpet stretching up the marble steps, flanked by photographers who'd been hired to capture George's guests arriving. Chandeliers blazed through the tall windows, and she could hear the muted symphony of wealth, laughter, clinking crystal, the confidence of people who'd never questioned their right to be anywhere. Her driver opened the door, and the October evening air kissed her shoulders. Beverly took a breath, feeling the sapphire silk move with her like a second skin, and stepped out onto the carpet. The first photographer's camera flashed reflexively, then paused. She watched confusion cross his face, followed by something sharper, recognition maybe, or just the instinctive understanding that whoever she was worth photographing. Within seconds, 3 other cameras swiveled toward her. Beverly had forgotten what it felt like to move through space like this, with every eye magnetized to her presence. She'd forgotten how to let her hips roll naturally, how to hold her chin at the exact angle that caught light like a blessing. But her body remembered. 3 years of making herself invisible evaporated with each step up those marble stairs. Miss, who are you wearing?" one photographer called out. She turned, gave them the smile she used to reserve for Vogue, and continued ascending. Behind her, she heard the frantic whispers, the sound of people trying to place her face, scrolling through mental databases of celebrities and socialites. Inside the main hall, George stood near the entrance greeting guests, Marcus and Trevor flanking him like courtiers. He was mid-laugh at something Trevor said when he caught sight of the figure moving through the doorway, backlit by the entrance lights. His laugh died in his throat. The woman walking toward him couldn't be Beverly. This woman moved like water, like music, like everything his driver was not supposed to be. The sapphire gown clung to her frame with the precision of custom tailoring, and the way she held herself, shoulders back, spine straight, face serene, belonged to someone accustomed to being watched, to being wanted. But it was her. The face was the same, though he'd never really looked at it before, had never noticed the elegant line of her neck, the way her cheekbones caught light, the quiet authority in her dark eyes. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed beside him. "That's her," Trevor finished, his tone stripped of its earlier amusement. Beverly stopped 3 feet from George, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive, something that definitely hadn't come from a department store. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice calm and smooth as the silk she wore. "Thank you for the invitation." George's carefully prepared smirk had completely abandoned his face. Around them, conversation was beginning to dip and swell as heads turned, as people registered the stunning woman in sapphire standing before their host. "George," he managed, his voice strangled, you look present," she finished for him, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I look present." Beverly moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent years navigating Fashion Week after-parties and gallery openings. She accepted champagne from a server who looked at her twice, clearly trying to place her face. Within minutes, a small orbit had formed around her, guests drawn by the gravitational pull of someone who looked like they belonged anywhere they chose to be. "I know you," said a woman in emerald Versace, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Weren't you God, this is going to bother me. Fashion Week, maybe 5 or 6 years ago? Milan, Beverly offered. Spring-summer 2015. I walked for Versace, actually. That's it! You wore the gold piece with The woman's face lit up with recognition. Beverly Chen! I knew I recognized you. What are you doing now? Are you still modeling? Before Beverly could answer, another guest chimed in, an older man with silver cufflinks. Chen? Any relation to the Chen who did that spectacular Valentino campaign? That was me, Beverly said simply. The conversations around her were beginning to shift, people leaning in, phones subtly emerging as guests started Googling her name. Beverly felt the power dynamic in the room rearranging itself, saw the confusion on faces that had expected one thing and encountered something entirely different. Then the crowd parted, and Catherine Vale appeared. Beverly's breath caught. Catherine Vale, editor-in-chief of Luxe, the fashion magazine that made or broke careers, the woman whose approval meant everything in the industry. She was smaller in person than she appeared in photographs, but her presence filled space the way only true power could. Beverly Chen, Catherine said, her British accent crisp as she extended her hand. I thought you'd disappeared to Paris or London. What brings you back to New York? Before Beverly could respond, George materialized at her elbow, his face still carrying traces of shock, but now trying to reassert control over his own party. Catherine, I see you've met my driver, he said, the emphasis deliberate, the smile forced. He was trying to reclaim the narrative, to reduce Beverly back to her place. Catherine's head turned toward George slowly, her expression shifting from warmth to something considerably cooler. I'm sorry, what? My driver, George repeated, his confidence already faltering under Catherine's stare. You have Beverly Chen driving you around? The Beverly Chen? The woman who opened for Valentino and closed for Balmain in the same season? The nearby conversations had gone completely silent now. People were staring. I didn't realize she was, George stammered. Clearly, Catherine cut him off. She turned back to Beverly, dismissing George entirely. We need to talk. I'm relaunching our iconic Returns series, and you would be absolutely perfect. Are you available for lunch next week? Beverly met George's eyes over Catherine's shoulder, saw the precise moment he understood that his joke had detonated in his face. I believe my schedule just opened up considerably. I'd be delighted. Catherine guided Beverly toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the curious stares and George's increasingly panicked expression. They settled near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Fifth Avenue, the city lights glittering below like scattered diamonds. I'm not going to pretend this is a chance encounter, Catherine said, her directness refreshing after 3 years of George's passive aggression. I've been trying to track you down for 6 months. You vanished completely in 2016, and no one could tell me where you'd gone. Family emergency, Beverly said quietly. My mother. By the time it was over, I'd burned through everything. Savings, connections, momentum. I needed work immediately, and driving paid better than you'd think. Catherine's expression softened. I'm sorry, truly. She paused, studying Beverly with the assessing eye that had built her reputation. But you're here now, wearing Elisab like it was made for you, which, if I'm not mistaken, it was, and you still have what very few people ever possess, presence. The camera loved you, Beverly, and it still will. Catherine, let me finish. Luxe is doing a major feature on women reclaiming their narratives. Second acts, we're calling it. Cover story, 8-page spread, shot by Patrick Demochelier. And I want you as the centerpiece. Beyond that, I've already spoken with IMG this week. They've been asking if anyone's heard from you. 1 call from me, and you'll have offers by Monday. Beverly felt something flutter in her chest, fragile and dangerous as hope. That's incredibly generous, but no buts. The industry wants you back, Beverly. The question is whether you want back in.
Before Beverly could answer, George appeared again, his face flushed with champagne and humiliation. The whispers had spread through the party now. People knew who Beverly was, which meant they knew what George had done, how he'd treated her. "Beverly, a word," he said tightly, gripping her elbow. "Privately." Catherine's eyebrow arched, but Beverly nodded. She followed George to an alcove near the coat check, where his composure finally cracked. "What the hell do you think you were doing?" he hissed. "You made me look like a fool in front of my guests." "I accepted your invitation," Beverly said calmly, "as requested." "You knew exactly what you were doing. You embarrassed me deliberately." "No, George, you embarrassed yourself by assuming someone with my education and bearing was driving your car." "You work for me," George snarled, his mask of civility completely gone. "And if you want to keep working for me, you'll go home right now and stop making a spectacle of yourself." Beverly looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a small man who'd mistaken cruelty for strength. "I quit," she said simply. "You what?" "I quit. Effective immediately. Find another driver, George. Find another person to make yourself feel superior to." She turned toward the ballroom, then paused. "And for what it's worth, your party is lovely. You should try enjoying it instead of worrying about who might outshine you." She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the alcove, and returned to where Catherine was waiting, with a smile.
The first photo hit Instagram at 11:47 p.m., posted by a fashion blogger who'd been covering the arrivals. Beverly in sapphire, ascending the Metropolitan Club steps, the image so striking it looked professionally staged. The caption read, "Beverly Chen sighting. The supermodel we all thought moved to Europe has been in NYC this whole time? #fashion icon. Where has she been?" By Sunday morning, the story had metastasized. A fashion journalist who'd been at the party tweeted the full narrative. So apparently Beverly Chen, yes, that Beverly Chen, has been working as a driver for tech billionaire George Whitmore for 3 years. He invited her to his birthday party as a joke to humiliate her. Instead, she showed up looking like absolute royalty and got offered a luxe cover shoot. "I'm obsessed with this energy." The tweet went viral within hours, 50,000 retweets by noon, 100,000 by evening. Someone dug up Beverly's old runway footage and spliced it together with photos from the gala. The contrast was devastating. Here was a woman who'd graced the world's most prestigious runways, reduced to opening car doors for a man who'd tried to mock her. The video accumulated 3 million views in 24 hours. #George Whitmore is over party began trending Monday morning. Business Insider ran a piece titled, "Tech Billionaire's Joke Backfires Spectacularly." Forbes followed with, "When Cruelty Meets Karma, the Beverly Chen Story." By Tuesday, CNN had picked it up, framing it as a broader conversation about how wealthy employers treat service workers. George's phone hadn't stopped ringing. His publicist, his board members, his investors, all asking the same question: is it true? His company's Instagram was flooded with comments. "Imagine being so insecure you have to mock your own employees. This is who's running a billion-dollar company? Cool tech, cruel CEO, no thanks." 3 corporate partnerships requested emergency meetings to discuss their contracts with Whitmore Technologies. The diversity and inclusion initiative he'd been planning to launch, carefully calculated PR, was quietly shelved when the optics became impossible. You couldn't claim to value people while treating a former supermodel as entertainment for your rich friends. Marcus and Trevor stopped returning his calls. By Wednesday, his company's stock had dipped 2%, not catastrophic, but enough that the board noticed, enough that they scheduled a meeting about brand management and leadership optics. George sat in his penthouse Wednesday night, scrolling through the coverage with a glass of bourbon that wasn't helping. Every article included the same photo,
Beverly on those steps, luminous and powerful, while he stood in the background of some shots looking small and stunned. His lawyer called. "George, we need to talk about crisis management." George said it was a joke, though his voice lacked conviction. "I was trying to be inclusive. By mocking her, that's your defense?" George had no answer. The silence on the line stretched uncomfortably. "I'd suggest a public apology, sincere, immediate, before this gets worse." But George's pride wouldn't let him, not yet, not when he could still convince himself that somehow this wasn't entirely his fault. The photos kept circulating, the story kept growing, and Beverly Chen's face kept appearing everywhere he looked, reminding him of the cruelest truth. Some people earned their dignity, while others merely purchased the illusion of it. The billboard went up in Times Square on a Tuesday in April, 40 feet of Beverly Chen wearing Armani against a stark white background, her gaze direct and unapologetic. The tagline read simply, "Return." Within hours, it was the most photographed advertisement in Manhattan. Beverly stood at street level that evening, anonymous in sunglasses and a simple coat, watching tourists take selfies in front of her face. Maria stood beside her, squeezing her hand. "Your mother would be so proud," Maria whispered. Beverly nodded, not trusting her voice. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. The Luxe cover that sold out in 3 days, the IMG contract, campaigns for Armani, Dior, and a stunning spread for American Vogue's September issue. She'd moved into a new apartment in Tribeca, hired Maria as her full-time stylist, and donated a significant sum to cancer research in her mother's name. But more than any of that, she'd reclaimed something she thought she'd lost forever. The certainty that she belonged in spaces she chose to occupy. The charity gala in May was for childhood literacy, held at the Natural History Museum beneath the Blue Whale. Beverly arrived alone, comfortable now in her solitude, no longer needing to shrink or hide. She was speaking with the event organizer about a potential partnership when she felt a presence at her elbow. George Whitmore looked diminished. Not physically, he was still tall, still silver-haired, but something essential had been extracted. His white suit jacket seemed like a costume now, rather than armor. "Beverly," he said quietly, "may I have a moment?" She turned, and he flinched slightly at her direct gaze. Around them, several people had noticed the encounter, phones subtly rising. "Of course," she said, gesturing to a quieter corner near the Hall of Ocean Life. They walked in silence. George's hands were shaking slightly. "I owe you an apology," he began, the words clearly rehearsed. "What I did, inviting you to my party as entertainment, treating you the way I did for 3 years, it was unconscionable, cruel. I've spent 6 months watching my reputation crumble, losing partnerships, seeing my own behavior reflected back through 1,000 articles, and I finally understand what I did to you." Beverly listened without interrupting, her face serene. "I'm sorry," George finished, "truly. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it." "I appreciate that," Beverly said after a moment. "Genuinely, it takes courage to apologize." George looked hopeful, waiting for absolution. "But George, I need you to understand something." Beverly's voice remained gentle but firm. "I don't need your apology to move forward. I already have. The billboard in Times Square, the campaigns, the career I'm rebuilding, none of that happened because you realized you were wrong. It happened because I remembered who I was." George's face fell slightly. "I accept your apology," Beverly continued, "but I'm not granting you forgiveness as if you have some claim on my peace. I've simply moved on to the life I deserve. What you do with your guilt is your own journey." She smiled then, kind but distant, the smile of someone who'd already turned the page. I hope you find what you're looking for, George. I really do. But I've already found what I was looking for." She walked back toward the gala, leaving him standing beneath the blue whale, small and alone, while she returned to a room full of people who'd chosen to see her.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the others we have on our channel. They are as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. We love you.